And now, please welcome the President of the American Society of Landscape Architects, Tom Tavella.
Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Did you have fun last night? That was a great event. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this year's annual meeting and expo. And I can't think of a better venue than Boston, the birthplace of our profession. And happy birthday to the Boston chapter, which turned 100 this year. Let's give them a round of applause. Over the past year as president, I had the honor of traveling to many chapters, meetings, and summits to help spread the ideas and mission of ASLA and the profession. One thing became very evident to me during these national and even international visits. Landscape architecture is gaining ground. Our profession has historically been the lesser understood design discipline. Many allied professions, as well as the public, are unaware of the breadth and depth of our expertise. As our profession steps out more aggressively through the efforts like the Public Awareness Campaign, federal and local advocacy, the Sustainable Sites Initiative, the ASLA Green Roof, and our work in green infrastructure and complete streets, the credibility and the visibility of our profession grows. We are gaining ground. If you want, you guys can say that with me too. We're going to say it a few times during this thing. As landscape architects, we bridge the gap between art and science. This bridge allows us to work cohesively and speak clearly on a variety of issues, from policy and land use, to biology and ecology, to materials and construction methods. Landscape architects have the ideal skill set to lead collaborative teams through the complex process of creating a sustainable future. I've seen the benefit of this collaboration throughout the country. With projects large and small, large landscape architects are making a significant impact in the public realm. We are entering a new era of complex problem solving where the state of the market demands a more collaborative approach. Landscape architects must continue to lead collaboration across all design disciplines. For example, resilience has emerged as an industry priority and a professional strength. Natural and man-made disasters are causing unacceptable loss in terms of life and property. When HUD Secretary Sean Donovan pulled together a panel to discuss Hurricane Sandy, we were at the table. Also this year, ASLA participated in the CEO Summit on Resilience. A joint effort among design professions gave us a better understanding of the work we all are doing to protect the environment. Another influential group that has recognized the value of this profession is the National Academy of Environmental Design. ASLA member Jim Palmer now sits on the board, and Susan Turner has taken over as ASLA's rep, and they will be presenting at this meeting. For the first time ever, we were invited to the annual Business for the Environment Global Summit in Delhi, India. And let me tell you, that was a hell of an experience. And the results of that will be at the table next year in Brazil. We are gaining ground. Landscape architects are helping to lead the way in green infrastructure. Not long ago, when the EPA was working on national rulemaking to establish a comprehensive program to reduce stormwater runoff, ASLA provided technical assistance and advice. We demonstrated that green infrastructure projects effectively and efficiently manage stormwater, and we did this in a big way. ASLA members submitted 479 case studies from 43 states, the District of Columbia, and Canada. I'd say that's pretty big. Another example is the Banking on Green report, released by ASLA in association with American Rivers, the Water Environment Federation, Eco Northwest. This report demonstrated how green infrastructure can save municipalities money and provide economic benefit community-wide. We are gaining ground. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Mark. Your future president is right there with me. This is a very exciting time for landscape architecture. We found our groove. While other allied professions struggled during this recession, we held our own, and we also advanced. Now we're seeing a quicker recovery and a deeper understanding of what our profession has to offer. We are gaining ground. All right. As you can see, it's been quite a year for ASLA, and as president, it's been especially rewarding to see us gain ground. I've been active in ASLA for well over a decade, holding multiple positions locally and nationally. I've learned so much about this profession, ASLA leadership, and the practice of landscape architecture across the country and around the world. I am prouder than ever of our profession, and I'm proud of all of you. And thank you for allowing me to represent you. Okay, now on with the show. This week promises to be an exceptional opportunity for all of us. The ASLA Annual Meeting Education Advisory Committee has done a brilliant job vetting submissions and putting together more than 140 ed sessions. I'd like to thank them for their work. This meeting wouldn't be possible without the strong support of our sponsors. And I'd like to take the time in a moment to acknowledge them. Let's take a look.
Landscape structures, forms and surfaces, Bartlett tree experts, Victor Stanley, Claycore, L.M. Schofield, Ironsmith, Hunter FX Luminaire, and Landscape Forms.
Thanks again to all of our sponsors. The ASLA Boston chapter, under the guidance of their host chapter co-chairs Scott Doty and Michelle Foltz, have worked tirelessly for more than a year to make this meeting shine. We owe a big thanks to our host chapter committee, the subcommittee chairs, and the member volunteers who have worked so long and hard on our behalf. Michelle and Scott, please accept these certificates on behalf of the ASLA for all your hard work and that of your chapter. Okay. Oh, picture time. Okay. Work. In 2008, ASLA introduced the Legacy Project as a gift to the host city of the annual meeting and expo. This year, the Boston chapter teamed up with the local affiliate of the ACE Mentor Program to design their legacy project, the renovation of the Patrick J. Kennedy Schoolyard in East Boston. Materials for the renovation will be donated by expo exhibitors. So let's take a moment to learn about this project.
Hello, my name is Catherine Morales. I want to see benches under the playground, swings, better soccer field, kickball, a bigger slide.
Hello, my name is Leslie Hernandez, and I want a climbing wall, a tunnel slide, a sign of the school name, more trash cans, more lights, and a science garden.
I'm a freshman at Wentworth Institute of Technology in Boston. My vision would probably be to get a lot more green in, actually.
My name is Jessica Fernandez. This will be my third year at ACE. Honestly, I just want the students to be happy with what the product of this project will be.
Grateful and thankful to everybody involved in this project. This has been an ongoing process for the Kennedy School for 2 to 3 years. Started as a pipe dream of just wanting new gardens and new play equipment for the kids, and evolved over time into what this is now, going to be this amazing new schoolyard build project. So just wanted to thank everybody for that.
We would like to thank the ASLA, ACE Massachusetts, and all of the chapter volunteers that have contributed to this process, and in particular, all of the exhibitors that have donated products and services to realize this project. This is only the beginning. Over the course of this winter and spring, we will be working with the ACE students to detail and document the project for construction to begin in the summer of 2014. We look forward to reporting on the implementation of the schoolyard at next year's annual meeting. Thank you again.
Wow, isn't that great? That's one of the best things about these expos and annual meetings. We get to leave this wonderful legacy project behind. I think it's great. And we're delighted to have the ACE Mentor Program students, volunteers, and leaders here today. Please join me in giving them a well-earned round of applause. This general session is brought to you by our longtime friends at Landscape Structures. Landscape Structures, once again, is a premier sponsor of the ASLA annual meeting. Landscape Structures has generally supported us, our profession, for many years and in many ways, and we are grateful for their continued support. Please join me in welcoming ASLA Fellow and Chairman of Landscape Structures, Steve King. Steve, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. As a landscape architect, I'm always pleased to sponsor ASLA's opening general session and our guest speaker. Our keynote speaker today is Jack Dangermond. He's a landscape architect by training and a technology wizard by design. Jack founded his company, Ezra, in 1969 to integrate the concept of Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, into the profession's toolkits. He envisioned how GIS could become a cost-effective way for landscape architects to visualize, analyze, and interpret data to reveal relationships, patterns, and trends. Today, with the help of Suzanne Foss and Eric Whitmer, Jack will demonstrate just how this wizardry works. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Dangermond.
Steve. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Good morning. My name is Jack. I don't have a little device. Oh, here it is. Tom, help me. I want to say thank you very much for inviting me here, and also I want to join Steve and Tom in welcoming you here to Boston. It's my distinct pleasure. I've sort of been working my whole life to be able to make this presentation to you, and I hope that it's up to par in your world. As Steve mentioned, I was trained as a landscape architect, and it's something that I really loved. I was attracted to it as a young person growing up in a nursery, designing with plants and designing all the things that you do. But along the way, I also got attracted into this field that I'm in, computing, and the notion of being able to digitize geography or build what I like to call computational geographic information. It's a mouthful. And then apply that to various kinds of applications. And I'm going to give you sort of a sense of that this morning in a variety of formats. My colleagues will show you some of it live. But I want to underpin a big idea, which is that the combination of this technology and your field, landscape architecture, can transform how the world turns out, how it evolves. I'll start with a little bit of background. When I left university, because I did go through university, finally at Harvard in landscape architecture, I couldn't find a place to work, so I started this firm. It now has about 9,000 employees around the world, and we specialize just in building these tools and supporting our users. That's its purpose and its main mission. And our users are doing some rather remarkable work, and I'll share some of that with you, applying these quantitative and visual tools to various applications. I'll start with this, however, and that is that you and I live in a world today that's facing some serious challenges. And I don't know how you feel about it, but it gets me kind of worried. I used to worry a lot when I was younger about it, that the trends are going in the wrong direction. Population growth, its effect on everything from biodiversity to climate change, it seems like it's going in the wrong direction. And every now and then, especially lately, I kind of get a sense that it isn't going to work out. Do you ever feel that way? Especially you who are sensitive to these processes probably know it more than normal society. Collectively, it seems, this is my thought, my colleagues' thoughts, we need to apply the very logic that you as practitioners do to create a better future, a more sustainable future. If you thought about the notion that we should lay out a plan for the planet, it's rather presumptuous, for the next 50 or 100 years, or make a plan 100 years out, that's starting to get to what I'm talking about. This would take all of our best science and our best technology and our best design talent to be able to actually turn this around. And that's my conclusion at this point in my life. It's not a joyful thought. It's not a way to start off such a wonderful meeting like this, but on the other hand, it's exactly where I feel and where I'm at right now. This field that you've chosen to make your life's work, landscape architecture, provides the systematic methodology for creating a sustainable future. As Tom mentioned, some of you are getting stronger voice to be able to communicate this more articulately. People like Ian McHarg certainly had the voice. He was a little presumptuous also. Those of you who know him know what I mean. On the other hand, I think he had it right that landscape architects have the methodology and the education in both science and design to be able to address these sorts of problems. The field that I chose, computational geography, or now popularized under the word GIS, provides a kind of platform for integrating science into the design process. Well, first, it's a kind of platform for understanding our world. I think I'm in the understanding business. Probably you are as well. being able to bring all of the processes together in an integrated form. GIS has these interesting characteristics of being visual and analytic and quantitative. It integrates things. And it's also comprehensive in the way that it brings our planet together at all scales. The fact that it's a tool gives us the opportunity to provide a kind of practical means for geo-empowering your work, landscape planning and landscape architecture. The applications of these tools are immense. They're now embedded in hundreds of thousands of organizations, from healthcare to disease to forest management to exploration of oil and gas, city planning, making things more efficient. They're delivering value in lots of fields. One of them is certainly planning for the future. Everything from urban gardens to regional plans, bicycle planning to bus routing to coastal zone management and on and on. It's also increasingly being used in the design process at the micro scale. I call it micro scale. Buildings, rooms, campuses, urban design scale. It's used to monitor change, not only monitor environmental changes, but also support the notion of remediation, like this little red map in the upper right corner in Florida, a long-term Superfund site which organizes all the information for remediation activities. But on the left, showing the effects of climate change in the Arctic, actually everywhere. GIS is used for managing natural resources, forestry, agriculture, picking the right sites for solar collectors and wind farms, for managing biodiversity in various areas, aquaculture, and these examples go on and on. It's also being used to plan for and respond to natural disasters, floods, typhoons. Earlier this week I was in South Asia. The aftermath of the typhoon there in the Philippines is just unbelievably shocking, brings awareness to everyone of the implications of bringing geography, all of these factors into the workflow of what they now must do. GIS is, on a more positive note, being used to do economic development in the developed world, like everything from Walmarts to Starbucks, site selection, to the developing world where finding the best location for agricultural centers for urban development is using and leaning on geographic information. It's being used in conservation. Around the world, thousands of NGOs use it to analyze and design strategies for conserving our fragile landscapes. And in education, it's becoming a new microscope. I like to call it a macroscope for seeing not only patterns and relationships, but processes that sequence kids to understand the meaning of multi-ology integration. GIS, at this point in my life, I'm very clear, GIS is changing how we think and see the world, and in small ways, changing how us as human beings act. Understanding, my good friend Richard Werman says, should precede action. And clearly, the understanding that geographic information delivers is affecting how we not only measure things, but predict things, and plan for things, and design things, and decide about things, and manage things. At a context level, this process is almost circular. And landscape architecture, as a profession, and you as individuals, are wired right into this. Whether you use computers or not, this kind of awareness that's being brought out through the computational aspects of geography are almost perfect. This technology is becoming more pervasive. There are a few million people that use it today, but it's amplifying out with the pervasiveness of GPS and satellite pictures. People are no longer lost. They can have their cell phone. I guess I lost my cell phone, but it's in the back room. It's a miraculous thing. People are no longer lost. You can go anywhere in the world and you're always conscious of where you are and how to get around. In the future, my vision is that, well, by the way, we are also lost, right? In the future, what I'd like to do is see geographic information organized in such a way that we are not lost, that we can actually bring information together, analyze it, have an understanding of the impacts that we are making, and rewire the situation. A lot of people are beginning to call this geodesign. New schools of geodesign which integrate landscape architecture into this process are saying that we can measure the world, we can integrate geographic knowledge into a design process and quickly come up with alternative designs and measure the consequences and therefore make more intelligent decisions. That's the complete cycle of what geospatial information promises. Let's look for a moment at what the technology is today and where it's going. If we roll the clocks back a few years, the fundamental concept of GIS was that it would be a platform where we could abstract digitally geographic information into a database and transactionally update it with different workflows, much like barcodes update a grocery store's content. We can update geographic phenomena through all of the measurements or transactions that we make on the environment. And in a common database where we measure it once, we can view it or analyze that set of informations computationally to support things like your field geodesign. The common way technically that this capability manifests itself in computing is in three patterns. The first pattern, which is simplest to understand, is the desktop pattern, and there are millions of people that hit the keyboards every day and do analytics and make maps. The second pattern is one of a server. The geographic data is put into a server and served out inside of an organization like USGS or out on the web so that people with a cell phone or a device can access geographic information as services. It's like dial tone, geodial tone or map tone. The third pattern that's emerging, and Suzanne, my colleague, will show this quite a bit this morning, is a situation where we put in the cloud geographic information, much like Steve Jobs did with music. I can listen to geodial tone, and for youth, I can mash it up and analyze different kinds of layers of data dynamically without any software locally. I could do it on a browser. This is a transformational change. So GIS is transforming into this thing called a web GIS. And it leverages all of the big technology trends like faster machines and device computing that we carry around, and cloud computing, faster machines, the web. It's also integrating virtually everything that we measure. LiDAR data, 3D data, real-time data, pervasive content that exists over the whole web. And out the other end is emerging this pattern of using devices with apps. I mean, how many of you here have smartphones or smart devices? Come on. So and these apps allow us to make maps dynamically of real-time data or analyze relationships, mash up data, or do analytics in a whole new pattern that doesn't require some geeks down the hall to be able to do it for me once a week. It's real-time, accessible through virtually any device, much like email is accessible through any device. It travels with me. Geography travels with me, and I can visualize it, and I can analyze it, and access it. This web GIS pattern can integrate any kind of data. Our traditional maps like soils and geology and demographics, as well as imagery, not only static imagery, but dynamic imagery, video, geospatially referenced digital imagery. And also can integrate in things like spreadsheets or tabular data, enterprise data, and social media, tweets, either as individual dots on a map or aggregated as contours of social media expression. And sensor networks like real-time traffic or the weather or water flows or, I mean, you're probably aware better than most audiences that I talk to that we're basically wiring up the planet. Virtually everything that moves and changes will be measured and made available in real time. And this is becoming very big data. You read somewhat about big data when they refer to NSA, spooking on all of us, but that technology is becoming available for commercial organizations, and it's not simply people data, it's virtually everything that exists out there. This web pattern represents a new platform. All of you are familiar with map overlay. Ian McCard really showed us that. The digital revolution involved taking those maps and putting them into a database. I've already explained that, and making it available through different devices. The difference is with the web GIS pattern is that we can take distributed maps or services like the weather service or the image service or a topographic map service from different places and mash it up dynamically, persist these analytics, look at them, sketch on them, plan with them, that sort of thing. This web GIS can not only overlay visually data, like plastic overlays, it can do it with analytics. This is a new thing. I can look at the relationship of this and that, between breast cancer and a pollution out on Long Island, between soils and slope and agricultural productivity. I can interpret geography dynamically from multiple sources of static and real-time information. This is a new age, and this age means that we can share our data, we can integrate our data, and break down some of the traditional barriers for collaborative research, those of you in the academy, and also collaborative work across different departments like engineers and planners and landscape architects working together, integrated around common services. This has great meaning to me. I've been working my whole life with the idea that this could happen, but now there's a shift. The web has allowed us with services to actually realize in a very simple form how this could happen. This system, this notion that we have geographic data as dial tone to us, can be spun up in the cloud. There are now actually over 1 million maps that have been shared this way, referenced, maps on everything. Maps that are on thematic data, demographic data, soils, geology, and base maps that cover the whole planet. Topography, imagery, ocean-based maps, gray tone base maps that allow me to put operational overlays on top of it. Are you following me on this? Just want to do a check on it. Well, you know, you get a little nervous up here. To show you this, I think my colleague Suzanne Foss, who's, as you'll shortly find, brilliant, is going to show it live. Suzanne, you want to give a sense of what this is like? Sure. You better welcome her by, you know, hard to get up here.
Thank you, Jack. So what we'd like to show you next is a little bit about how this web GIS can enable landscape and geodesign workflows. What we're looking at here is something we call ArcGIS Online. It's a platform that enables mapping for everyone, and it gives users access to amazing geospatial content. So let's talk about that content first. ArcGIS includes, as Jack was saying, a beautiful suite of comprehensive base maps at many levels of cartographic detail. So this means that you can find the right context for your work. So whether you need to overlay simple data against an informative map, whether you need to show certain types of features like streets, terrain, or the oceans, or whether you simply need a muted backdrop to overlay and emphasize your operational data. Now, these base maps are authoritative and assembled from the best available information. Through our Community Maps program, we incorporate millions of features from thousands of contributors across the world. Last year, our World Topographic Base Map was updated with community content for Switzerland, South Korea, Japan, and many more areas. This community content from the authoritative owners of the information gives us a greater level of detail than we could achieve from commercial sources alone. ArcGIS also includes a diverse collection of imagery. And last year, we added extensive sets of imagery to our World Imagery Base Map. So first, we updated the continental US with 30-centimeter imagery. And this gives amazing detailed images no matter where you work. Whether your work focuses on a large city like Washington, D.C., or whether you focus in more remote rural areas like Little Salt Marsh in Kansas. After the US, we added 60-centimeter imagery for much of Western Europe. And this gives amazing resolution over cities like London, Paris, and Rome, but also smaller towns like Perugia here in Italy. Finally, we updated the World Imagery Base Map with 1-meter imagery for hundreds of other locations around the world. And this gives you better imagery base maps on every continent, from South America to Africa, and all the way to Asia. Overall, in the last year, we added or updated over 100 million square kilometers of coverage. That's over 2/3 of the world's landmass. In addition to reference maps, ArcGIS also offers intelligent maps about people. And these maps range from topics such as demographics, lifestyles, economics, health, and even behaviors. These maps cover the US as well as dozens of other countries around the world, and each of them is ready to use for mapping and analysis. So let's take a quick look at one of these. I'm opening up per capita income across the United States in 2012. And with these demographic maps, you get data at every scale, from the state to the county to zip code areas, and down to census areas. And you can view more information about any area in detailed pop-ups because there's data behind these maps. And you can also change the maps on the fly because they're served dynamically. So as we said, there's data behind the maps. There's additional attributes behind each of these data sets. So in this case, instead of looking at per capita income, we might look at median net worth. And then we can also change the colors. And we can look at an entirely different pattern in the human landscape in this case. Rounding out some of this amazing content in ArcGIS Online are data sets that describe the land and the environments that we live in. So these maps range on topics from land use to wildlife, ecology, energy, federal lands, infrastructure, and terrain. And these data sets are also authoritative and assembled from the best sources we can find. For example, the World Elevation Service is a multi-source, multi-scale data set that incorporates elevation from sources such as 1-kilometer SRTM to 30-meter and even 5-meter data from the National Elevation Data Set. And it's provided as a dynamic service with raster functions predefined, so you can easily swap between different terrain products like slope, aspect, and hillshade. And this is just one of over 30 different landscape layers that are available to users of ArcGIS Online. Content is the first step in understanding our world. And ArcGIS includes a diverse set of resources, not only from imagery and base maps, but also maps from the community, maps about people and demographics, and maps about the living and physical elements of our environment. And together, as Jack was saying, these come together to form a living atlas, a myriad of data sets that describe the world that we live in. Now, having shown some of these amazing resources and content, what we wanted to show you next was an application that uses some of this content. This is an application that enables landscape analysis in Geodesign. So you can pick and choose from different layers in the living atlas to ask questions and do planning. So what's a question we might ask with this application? We might ask, where in the United States is there valuable land that's also threatened by urban development? And what we can do is define our question in terms of these landscape layers. So we might define valuable land by critical habitat, low road density, and different types of land use. And we want to see where these areas match up with development risk. Then we tell the application how important each of these layers are by assigning weights. So we might start out with equal weights for each layer. And we can also take a closer look at each variable and control the influence of its values. So here I'm emphasizing to protect habitat for both threatened and endangered animals. And when we run the model, the different inputs are summarized as a weighted overlay on the fly. In other words, the different layers are combined and returned as a suitability map. So in this case, green means that the areas don't match our criteria, but orange and red areas are where we might want to prioritize conservation, given the specs that we put into the model. And we can also take these factors and we can dynamically reweight them to ask the question in different ways. So in this case, we might be saying that critical habitat and development risk are the most important parts of our question. And when we rerun the model, the results update on the map within seconds across the entire United States. And as we zoom in, the analysis is refined. The data sets behind the application are resampled, and the processing is repeated at the appropriate scale, letting us see the true depth of information available here. We can use this kind of analysis to begin to balance conservation and development priorities. So let's take a look at Santa Cruz, California. Santa Cruz is a city that's been experiencing urban sprawl in recent years. And if we compare it with our analysis, we can see an area just north of the city where it looks like development might threaten valuable land. We can use the application to do some planning here. So using some simple sketching tools, we can actually model scenarios and land use plans. So this is the beginnings of a plan that I've created. And I'm going to first use these tools to create a quick conservation proposal in this area. I'll sketch a plan for some open space, and I'm using my analysis as a guide. I'm letting the conservation analysis actually inform my initial plan. And then what I can do is actually modify this plan and align it based on its context. So for example, its political context. I'm using our topographic base map to align this plan based on its administrative context. I'm aligning it to where the state and federal boundaries already exist. And this makes sure that I'm setting aside only land that actually needs to be protected. And I can also align this plan using the other base maps available in the ArcGIS system. So if I change my base map perhaps to imagery, I can now align my plan based on the physical environment. So I can make sure that I avoid existing developed areas, like this neighborhood here. And I can also make sure that I incorporate as much of the open space that's available as possible. In this way, we're applying a geodesign approach to planning because we're using landscape analysis as well as the contextual information to plan for both the built and natural environment at the same time. Now, as we work with this plan, we can also monitor it as we're creating it. So these dashboards show the composition of our current land use plan. And if we click on each of these areas, What it's doing is summarizing the analysis behind this plan. So if I click on the open space conservation plan that I just created, I can see that 2/3 of the area underneath that plan were rated as a high priority for protection. So again, that's based on the conservation analysis that we created based on that criteria, based on that data from the Living Atlas. But how do we determine how well this plan actually matches up to other alternatives? We can use this same approach to contrast multiple scenarios at the same time. So here I'm opening a second scenario with some slightly different plans for conservation. And I can see from the dashboard that I'm setting aside roughly the same amount of area for open space, about 997 acres. But in this case, when I compare it to the analysis for valuable land, only about 40% of my conservation area was rated as a high priority for protection. And that's in contrast to my first scenario, where 2/3 of that area was rated as a high priority. So in this way, we can easily swap back and forth between different approaches to our land use planning or our geodesign and understand how well we're achieving our conservation goals. So with this application, this is an example of how WebGIS can allow you to not only fuse landscape analysis and ask questions, but use that analysis to inform your design, and then also be able to use that analysis to compare and contrast, to continually analyze your design against that information. Going forward, we're excited to see how you might be able to use these tools for analysis, for planning, and of course for geodesign. Thank you very much. Jack.
Thanks. Good. Thank you very much. It's good. Do you like it? She's great, and now what Suzanne was doing is using an app, no software locally, an app to access web services. The first thing that you should realize is it's continental wide, and working with the Gates Foundation, we hope to bring it globally, of landscape and other kinds of parameters. Also, our users are contributing thousands of maps every day, sharing their material so that we can exploit it and use it in various ways, a kind of living atlas. How I access that knowledge is through apps. Simple apps like viewing apps or query apps, or also data collection apps. If I have a device, I can be in the field observing things, sending it to the cloud, integrating it with data, using it later. That's very useful for crowdsourcing information. Citizens collecting data about their city or voting on various things. Also apps for mapping and analytics, like Suzanne showed. Weighted overlay is an example of it. And finally, apps for telling stories. This is in some ways my favorite. I can take a web map, which is the principal medium that this system is built on. It's like a CAD drawing in concept. It's a web map that I can embed. I can take a web map and I can embed it inside of a story map. This is a map related to text and photographs, and I can publish it in a few minutes. So if I do some design, I can publish it and let other people on the web comment on it or work with it. Today there are thousands of story maps that are published, and you can look at them if you just Google story maps about elephant poaching, or story maps about taking a tour in a city, or story maps about designs. More about this in a moment. The second major way that people do GIS is with desktops. And this is the sort of technology platform that most professionals use for gathering data, massaging data, manipulating data, visualizing data, doing more high-end analytics. This, like I said before, is used by millions of people. These desktops are now getting connected with the cloud so they can be used for capturing data, uploading it, serving it, or ingesting cloud information into more analytic workflows. A new capability exists in this desktop world called procedural modeling. Anybody know what I'm talking about there? procedural modeling. I don't suspect that many of you have heard of it. It's actually a new medium for designing and creating 3D realities. It started actually in Hollywood with the ability to create sets, visual digital sets. Movies like Cars 2 or Man of Steel. These were all built with our procedural tools. It's kind of a joke in a way that the movie industry was there first. But embedded inside of this is unique and interesting design tools. I can procedurally design by setting up rules about objects like buildings, like parameters or performance characteristics of buildings or trees. And this can be used for urban and landscape designing, for visualizing, but most importantly for analyzing. So both designing and evaluating, something that you do in the design process. And finally, for being able to publish the results of these designs in a web scene. It's kind of like a web map, except that it's 3D. I can send it out and people can look at it. Procedural design is, I like to refer to it as smart, in the sense that it's database and rules driven. I come up with rules about objects that have performance characteristics, like infiltration rate of building objects, and I can design it. It's not like SketchUp, it's actually much more intelligent in the sense that I can create objects and then at the same time understand their impacts, like 3D characteristics, buildings, infiltration rates, runoff, impact on traffic, etc. This procedural design is smart in the sense that I can very rapidly generate a lot of alternatives once I've got the rules defined. This transit-oriented design scheme in Honolulu laid out a rapid transit scheme and looked at option 1 with rapid transit, option 2 without it, and looked at, with rule generation buildings, the impacts on sprawl or the impacts on open space in the surrounding region of Honolulu. This definitely affected the political process there and allowed citizens to be able to look at the implications of alternative designs. It's a very cheap way, I don't want to say cheap, but inexpensive way to generate multiple alternatives and then make them available as scenarios. These can be published in something we call web scenes. This is an example of a web scene. This is a web scene, a document kind of like a PDF, which doesn't require software. I can put it up, I can send it out to citizens, for example, and in their browser they can look at visualizations, building envelopes, shadows, do simple or more complicated analytics like before, after scenarios like this. You know, what did it look, what will it look like? You get the idea here? And this kind of visualization, again, requires no software. It's like a PDF file. I already said that, but you can disseminate it out and other people can actually look at it. They can put thematic layers relative to it, see patterns in association with visualizations, and on and on and on. But again, like I did with Suzanne, I strongly prefer that we move ahead, if I can make this move ahead, good, and introduce my other colleague, Eric Whitner, who is also an extraordinary person with respect to geodesign and urban 3D visualization. Eric.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to do today is introduce you to procedural modeling, and I'm going to do it by doing a little redevelopment scenario in Jack's hometown of Redlands, California. And I'm going to use our procedural design tool called City Engine. So Redlands is actually undergoing some change right now. We're going to add in a light rail connection to the city of San Bernardino and their Metrolink. And we want to do some redevelopment in the area that reconnects the downtown, which is subdivided by this old 1960s style mall, and then redevelop the buildings in between this mall and our transit station. So what you're looking at right now is pre-generated textured 3D models from pictometry. We can actually subset those out and start bringing in features that we want to look at and want to enhance procedurally. So I'm going to start by adding roads. I'm going to turn off the train so you can see them better. These roads define the areas we can build, the areas inside the blocks that we can actually enhance and create procedurally. So what I've done now is I've subdivided the roads into the lanes, the areas where cars can drive, the sidewalks. I've subdivided the blocks into parcels, and I've also brought in some footprints in 3D. So what I want to do is apply a procedural rule to generate some 3D content. So I'm going to select this block and the streets around it and just generate some 3D features. Now this rule simply iteratively splits and creates buildings on top of these existing geometries. So let's take a look at what I've created. Here's some 3D buildings, and I want to be clear, none of these existed before in a database. They're all just being driven by this rule-based system. So I can select this building here, take a look at its attributes, and start manipulating it and changing it. So I'm going to turn it into a 6-story building. Maybe I want to change the appearance. There's actually a whole section of the rule that deals with facades, so I'm going to change the exterior from brick to cement. Right, but it's more than that. I can actually modify the geometry of this feature even though it's procedurally driven. So I'm going to grab this building and I'm going to move it out towards the corner there. And then I actually want to scale the feature and modify the footprint to make it a little bit smaller. And you'll notice the procedural rule is dynamically adapting and changing that building. So I'm not manually creating these masses, I'm automatically creating these masses. Now I mentioned that came from footprints. What we're looking at here is that block, and that block is automatically being subdivided based on a rule into a set of parcels. So again, I can just apply a procedural rule to it to generate 3D content. So again, let's look at this. This is slightly different. Rather than starting from a footprint, the rule is actually defining the setback, step back, etc., based on the zoning codes of where I need to put that building footprint. So if I expand the zoning portion of this rule, I can start manipulating those portions of the rule. So I'm going to change the street setback to 1 meter. You notice the building adapted in the background. I'm going to change the side setback to 6 meters. If I rotate around this building now, you'll notice it created a little green space. Right? So it's not just procedural content off of footprints, it's also off of parcels. So I want to select a series of these features and just generate all of this portion of Redlands. So I'll select everything, hit generate, and we'll tilt and we'll watch the city fill in the background here. So it's creating roads, streets, vegetation, all kinds of features in there. And I kind of want to call that out. It's not just about buildings. It's actually about streets as well. So if I select this street, and again, look at its attributes, it's being driven by a rule. So if I change the lane width from 3 meters down to 2 meters, it's going to add more lanes there automatically on that road. Perhaps I'm going to be mean and I'm going to take out all the bike lanes because I hear it's okay to kill cyclists, according to the New York Times. So, there's a variety of things that you can create using these procedural rules. It also includes vegetation. So let's turn the trees back on here. Here I've got a vegetation model. This is a new rule set that we've pushed out there that has a lot of example models. And again, that model's parametric. So I'm going to make the tree 15 meters high. I'm going to reduce its crown size. And there's actually a whole library of different types of trees behind it, right? And it creates that 3D model. There's also different renditions. I could make it a simple fan for if I wanted a simplified geometry, or if I wanted to do some sort of more cartoonish, I could make an analytical shape that I could use in line of sight analysis. So now what's going on with this building over here? This one looks a little odd. I'm going to show you what we've done here. This rule set not only creates realistic facades, but it also can represent the use inside of a building. So if I select this building and, again, go down to my zoning, I see that I've got commercial in red on the first floor and then residential above it. So I'm going to change that to 2 floors of commercial and then residential above it. And you'll notice there's photovoltaic panels on the roof, so there's a rule for generating that. I could change the roof types, new green roofs. But why do I care about all that? Here's why. This rule has a set of metrics built into it. So if I scroll down to the bottom here, I'm actually getting building performance metrics. So I'm measuring electrical consumption, energy consumption for heating, wastewater production, gray, black water. I'm getting the total square footage, the floor area ratio, the percentage of lot coverage is all being generated dynamically from this procedural rule. And it's cumulative. So if I select multiple features, I can do summaries across whole neighborhoods or actually whole designs and then do a comparison against the existing design to measure the performance of my design. And it's not just that, right? There's other ways of thematically displaying buildings. So here we're looking at a set of buildings. They're blue on top, right? The light blue means that they have high impermeability. The dark blue means they have lots of permeability, so they're more permeable. These are green roofs. They're capturing the water that's runoff. And you'll notice we're doing the exact same thing on the ground. So this street is actually developing a metric of its total impermeable surface in its report dynamically based on its width. Now, I mentioned this is a design tool, and I actually want to just quickly alter this design. I'm going to go in and add a street. So I'm going to turn on the terrain so I have something to draw on top of, and just quickly. So what did I do there? I just created a street. I defined a new block. If I select that block, right, I can turn on the creation of parcels inside that block. And here's a rule. This is a city engine rule. I'm going to drag and drop it onto that parcel. And I create a building. I'm going to select that building. I don't think it's very attractive, so I'm going to make it U-shaped, open towards us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on facade generation. A few clicks, 3D building, measuring floor area, measuring all those metrics, performance metrics for electricity. Very, very simple. Now, what if I want to share this? I can zoom out, and as Jack mentioned, I can export this to a web scene. So a web scene is a browser-based 3D format, doesn't require any plugin. And Jack showed kind of a swipe comparison. Here's a side-by-side comparison of this design we've done for the city of Redlands. Right? So on the right side, we can see the existing mall. On the left side, we can see our proposed change. And this scene is actually consumed by a viewer, and that viewer has some smarts built into it. So let's say I wanted to visualize sun shadows over the course of the day. Right? I can dynamically cast those. Keep in mind, you've seen this before, but this isn't a browser. Right? Very easy, very lightweight. There's a commenting function. So actually, you can submit a design, push it out to the public. The public can comment on it, and every time they comment, it captures their view. So you can see exactly what they're looking at when they're commenting. So it's a feedback tool as well. But maybe you want more. You want to throw your users into the design in an experiential way. You could actually export this to a kind of gaming engine. This is Unity 3D. I'm actually going to start running around the design we've done here in downtown Redlands, so I can actually take a look at it. So I want to look at the street. This street is now connecting to the park. That's the old downtown down the street. So I can actually get inside this and see what this area is going to look like. And if I'm Jack and I come from Redlands, I can leap tall buildings and do things that I can't normally do in real life, or maybe fly around and look at the scene.
Out. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Also very exciting. I have a couple of final slides, simply these. I sense at this point that GIS is going to transform landscape architecture. It's going to allow us to have all the content we want. It'll allow us to sketch and work with geodesign tools, both in 2D and 3D. It's going to, I think, ultimately scale up both landscape architecture and the computational work that I've been doing. This requires, however, you to understand the technology. It's not so difficult anymore. People used to say, down the hall, those guys can do it. The CAD guys or whatever. No, I'm talking about embracing it from top to bottom and understanding it, integrating it into workflows, and sharing the methods that you build among and between yourselves. I think that designers, in order to make this vision a reality, are essential to do it. Now, GIS and landscape architecture requires more than technology. It requires leadership and vision of it. It involves understanding what it actually can do. Perhaps this session will open up your eyes about some aspects of that. It requires integrating it into workflows, and it also requires good people who want to do this kind of more rational-based design, integrating science into design. In other words, a kind of culture of moving along with what science and technology can offer. I'll conclude with this. I tried to make a case that we need to create a better future, and it gets real personal with me, my family, my community, my organization, and ultimately the planet. We need to do that. And your work, actually, the whole work of landscape architecture's profession, is already helping that. It's doing it incrementally, piece by piece, project by project. It's definitely something that we need to leverage up. I also sense that GIS technologies, these sorts of automated tools, can be a voice and a platform that can inspire more integrated design and better decision-making everywhere. Embracing this and building it into your existing work patterns, I think can actually transform the world. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it.